My name is Greg O'Connor, and I'm the Educational Technology Manager and part of the TextHelp Asia Pacific team. And we're based out of Brisbane, and we look after all things TextHelp across Australia, New Zealand, and the whole Asia Pacific region. And it's my great pleasure, and I'm thrilled to have as the other presenter today is Kimberly Hall, which I've spelled her name incorrectly. I can see on the slide deck. G'day, Kimberly.
You've only got the an incorrect I.
Yeah, I've capitalised I. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Hello, Greg, and everybody else. I'm Kimberly. My background is I studied linguistics and then taught as an English teacher for a long time, and then had the privilege of working across all Catholic schools in Victoria in a learning and teaching consultant role. And now I'm very lucky to work with EdTech team who put on professional learning opportunities for schools and departments of education all across Australia, well, all across the world, but I oversee our Australia and New Zealand branch. And just as a bit of context for how I got here, I was a long time advocate of all products that, really Read and Write in particular of TextHelps, and I didn't know any of the TextHelp team, but I had come across this amazing tool that as a teacher and as someone working with teachers, I was telling everyone that they had to use, and then I met TextHelp folk and realised that there was this whole other world of amazing tools, including Fluency Tutor, what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and in the process, we've been working together, doing stuff for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years or so, or more perhaps. So it's been great. So it's great to have Kimberly. So Kimberly and I are going to kind of joint present as we go. We're going to explore Fluency Tutor. And so what we'll do over the next hour or so is we'll do a bit of an overview of what Fluency Tutor is, and hopefully that's going to give you give you some ideas about, if you're thinking about using Fluency Tutor, give you some ideas about starting the school year off using Fluency Tutor. That'll take up most of what we'll do today. Right at the end, I will kind of come back and help you get access to a whole bunch of resources. Probably about next Tuesday or so, you'll get an email from us that'll give you links to a whole bunch of stuff, including these slides from this presentation, the video of this webinar, and some other resources as well. Actually, if you hang in there, right at the end, I'll give you a bit of a sneak preview of some of those resources and how you can get those, and also how you can get Fluency Tutor if you don't currently have it. But Kimberly, we want to kind of focus on these learners, don't we, when we're talking about Fluency Tutor today?
Yeah, we thought when Greg and I were talking about this webinar, and we were thinking about that obviously, as Greg said, we want to give a bit of an overview of what Fluency Tutor is, and then some ideas around ways of using it in different contexts and different classrooms with different learners. So we sort of decided on these 4 rough categories that we will cover, as Greg said, as Greg demos some of the product, and then we might do a little bit of a recap at the end if we have forgotten any key points as well.
Cool. Yep. So I'm going to kind of drive it, and then Kimberly's going to be jumping in and helping as I do, and kind of make me do stuff outside my comfort zone. I have. In fact, we might try to do a few hacks and think about how we can do some of this stuff differently. So if you actually already know a bit about Fluency Tutor, the cool thing today is hopefully we'll actually extend your learning a bit more about what it does as well. Just some housekeeping before we actually dive in. All those people who are watching this live, so as I said, it will be a recording of this at the end, but if you're watching this live currently, what you'll have on your screen is a control panel somewhere, as well as you can see my screen. You can minimize that control panel whenever you wish to kind of make it smaller and bring it out by pressing the little orange button with the arrow. You're muted. We haven't turned your microphone on. So if you are busting to ask a question, there is a question panel, and you can ask questions in that panel. And we have 2 of our text helpers from our team, Barbara Landsberg and Fiona Thomas, in the background there, and they will be monitoring the questions and answering them where they can, and occasionally they'll even jump on and tell us what those questions are, and we're happy to kind of answer questions as we go along. So just to put a bit more context in this, if you're very new to TextHelp and what we do, so we're as I said, we have a small team here based out of Brisbane looking after the Asia Pacific region, and in particular Australia and New Zealand. But we're a global company. Our head office is over there in Belfast, and we also have an office in Boston, and we're right across the globe, across students and teachers everywhere. In fact, one of our products, Read and Write, is actually being used by over 18 million people. Hopefully most of those are kids as we speak. So we have a range of different tools, and we started out primarily initially as a literacy, focusing on literacy tools as an educational technology company. In the last couple of years, we actually have also taken on STEM and mathematics, and we actually now, our premier product around that is called Equatio. But today, we're going to be focusing on Fluency Tutor. And one of the things that really gets us excited at TextHelp with all our products, and particularly something like Fluency Tutor, is the way that teachers and students use these in schools, and the way they actually use these tools to personalize the learning environment. And in particular, supporting this concept of giving agency to our students, to our learners, giving them the power to actually act, to do what they need to do, and have the tools available for what they want to do. And we're going to kind of demonstrate that hopefully today when we give you an overview of Fluency Tutor for Google. And it is called Fluency Tutor for Google because it is actually a product that will only work in Google Chrome. So you actually need to have Google Chrome. You don't actually need to have Google Classroom operating in a school, but you do need to be using the Google Chrome browser, and students and teachers actually need to have a Google account to access this. So that's a really important proviso when we're going through this stuff. One of the things about Kimberly, about reading, and so today's not we're not going to be diving into how to teach reading, but you know, when I do a kind of I do a Google reading research, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes out. We know so much about reading, and that's just some of the what I kind of call the big 6 areas that we need to focus on. But one of them that's really important that we really need to focus on, I think, is this idea of fluency, about students just reading with fluency, reading so that they can read accurately, quickly, and also actually reading themselves, reading with expression. And so it's been a kind of a thing. I don't know, when you first started teaching, Kimberly, how did you do that? How did you kind of work out that stuff with the students that you work with? Did you do it like this, like this? Or are you? That was before your day. Yeah, you're too young here.
No, but it is a very laborious process for teachers, and like lots of teachers that I have the privilege of working with and have over the years will tell you how much time it takes them to calculate those things that you're talking about, and that's time that's taken away from them actually being able to give really authentic feedback and help those students. They're really spending all their time with gathering the data, because we are obsessed with data, which we should be, because data can really help us in our teaching and learning. But we get all the data, and if the data takes too much time to get, then we don't have time to act on the data, and that's the most important thing. So
yeah, and the other thing about that too is it's really is teacher driven, the whole thing, isn't it? The students really have, apart from actually being recorded reading, they're really having not much of a role in this process at all, and sometimes not even given the feedback of what that data indicated to them. So what we need to do is mix that up, and that's what we've done with Fluency Tutor. We think we've actually provided a way in a digital environment, in this case the Google environment, how we can support students around fluency, around reading, and as a result it supports comprehension, and it just letting our students understand that becoming an avid reader can change their lives, and we need to be, this is one of the tools we need to support them in that journey. So what Fluency Tutor does, it's an app in Google, it's not in Google Chrome, it's not an extension, or there is an extension part of it which I'll show you, but it becomes a Google Chrome app that sits in your account, when you open up Chrome, and it supports struggling readers and language learners, and also we're going to look at proficient readers as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff there. But it supports all my students. It will improve their confidence with reading aloud. It's actually, as a Google part of the Google ecosystem, it's very, very Google friendly. It gives teachers and students the ability to engage in real-time feedback, so that kind of formative feedback loop happens. And also for busy teachers, it helps us track progress and gives us that data, as Kimberly was saying. So so what I'm going to do, that's how it looks when you actually you'll see it in your when you get it installed. It'll be in with all your other apps in your Chrome. Now, what I'm going to do is, rather than, I've got a whole bunch of slides you can see here. I've got, and I can, I've got set up. They're really, I'm just going to put them in the slide deck, because when we finish the webinar, and you get next week, you'll get a link to get the resources, including this webinar, this slide deck. All those slides I've got put in there, they're kind of there to jog your memory, but I'm not going to talk to slides. We're going to jump in. And we're going to jump in and start to check it out. So let's, first of all, here I am. So I've got it installed, and I simply type in fluency.texttalk.com into my browser, into Chrome, and up comes my my dashboard. And this is the dashboard when I've got Fluency Tutor installed. Fluency Tutor, when I've got it installed as a teacher, so I have a teacher account in my school. When I've got it installed as a teacher, I can have as many students as I like attached to my account. In my school, for instance, I could have as many teachers having an account, and they could have as many students attached to their accounts as well. You can have your class, you can have students outside your class, you can determine a whole bunch of ways that you do that. And if you look up the top there in green, and I've just got this set up here, you can see here it's got some tips, you know, saying to me, oh, look, you can click here to enable Google Classroom integration, and you can get your students to have that, and they can install it on their machine, and then they can use this unique class code. And that's down the bottom of my screen, this unique class code. So if I'm using Fluency Tutor and I'm using Google Classroom, I just need to share that class code with my students in my class via Google Classroom, and then I'm going to be automatically communicating with all those students through that. Now, I don't actually have Google Classroom. That's okay. I won't do that, because I'm going to be doing it via Google Drive, and I can share it via individual Google Drives with my students. So I'm going to go up here and get rid of those, because they're just reminders that tell me what I can do. And I've got my dashboard is here. So I've got it set up first. When I come and look at it, what I'll be doing if I'm in my class, I want to look at who my students are that I currently have. And you can see that I've got these students. This is obviously not a real classroom. These aren't real students. They're just ones I'm using for this demo purpose. So I've got a couple of students, and I can automatically see who my students are, what their average lexile level is that they've been reading at, what their reading age is, and that's actually their grade level, what they've been reading, what grade level they've been reading at, how much time they've been reading. So this guy Hayward's been reading thousands of hours. Well, he's actually been doing lots of demos with him, but that's actually me. But anyway, so it's actually not real time there. But it tells me over here actually how much time he's been on been actual reading, as well as if it was authentic, how much time he was on task, how many passages my students have read, in this case, how many passages Hayward has read, for instance. And as a result of what I've been doing with Hayward over the period of time, what his or her average words correct per minute rate is. So I've kind of got all this information sitting there for me. I can go into my control panel, and I'll just bring it up here, and I can see any recent activity. So when I click on that, I can see recent activity, because what happens with Fluency Tutor is I have the ability to share reading passages. So I share a reading passage with my students, and then my students can actually then read that passage, record that reading, send it back to me, and I can do a whole bunch of stuff with that recording, including collecting data, giving feedback, and charting progress for my students. And here you can see I've been doing a lot of work with this guy called Hayward, and I can see what the recent activity has been. Of course, if I had a number of students in my class, they'd all be sitting in here as well. And I can see on the next tab down on my control panel, also I get a record of the different passages I've been sharing with my students. So let's jump in and start. This will become clearer if I start to share a passage. And down here on my dashboard, there is share a passage. I'll click on that. And here I have a whole bunch of passages available. I think there currently is over 150, 200 reading passages. I could be wrong. I think there's a lot more than that, but there's a bunch of reading passages.
Over 500, Greg. I read that online. I read that on a website, just one of your websites, just as an FYI.
One of our websites, the information that I should know about. Yeah.
Just,
okay.
You work for TextHelp, not me, but that's okay.
That's okay. Hey, and yeah, just don't tell anybody in TextHelp I didn't know that number.
Okay, we won't bring it up on a publicly recorded webinar or anything.
Good. And when I look at, so we have all these over 500 passages. They're all in there. They've already been scaled based on Lexile level, on reading age. Now that reading age is actually the grade level. So that's actually grade level reading age. And then there's word count. And then for over here, this column, this type, where it's a little green icon, that means it's actually one of the reading passages that we have built in, those 500 plus passages. Where it's purple, it means it's a passage that I've generated myself. And I'm going to show you how we can do both those things. So let's, first of all, let's share.
Sorry, Greg, before you go on.
No, you can, please.
I know a question that I get asked a lot when I show teachers about Tutor is about the reading age grade, and because that varies internationally. So what is this something that if I'm an Australian teacher or a New Zealand teacher that's equivalent? How does that work?
It's US grade level. So there is a difference in that. So you can get charts or comparison charts that will compare, grade 6 in the US. What does that look like in terms of reading age in Australia and New Zealand? So it's a rough. It's a rough grade level really for me. It's not absolutely precise, but it is actually US. Down the bottom, if I just wait while you're talking about that, Kimberly, down the bottom over here, at the bottom left-hand corner, you can also see that I can set this up so that when I've opened up, when I've set up my Fluency Tutor account, I can decide what kind of English spelling conventions I'm going to be using, and also it will generate a whole, give me access to different voices as well. And I've obviously chosen the Australian because I actually want access to Australian voices, but also I want to have our spelling system. So even though it might be doing the grade level on US, we've got to make sure that it actually is using where possible Australian or UK spelling as well. So you can choose the what region you're in there as well. So is that okay?
Yeah, I just thought I'd ask that because that's a question I've been asked a number of times. And I guess for teachers when they're looking at this, that for teachers in our context, or I guess Australia, New Zealand, but across Asia Pacific as well, potentially that it's a combination of looking at that Lexile level and the reading age that potentially will help you. And I mean, we know with the reading age as well that this is the whole point, that this sort of technology exists, that my grade 3 children are not all reading at the same grade 3 level. So
exactly. Exactly. Do you find many teachers in Australia and New Zealand actually use the Lexile level as an indication of reading?
I think that they use it within this tool, so as a guide to help them when they're picking passages. But I would say beyond this, that wouldn't be something that I have seen commonly utilised. I've just seen more because there are over 500 passages. It can be a bit of a way of helping, because you can, I'm sure you'll show filtering the passages for different levels and things like that when you find them. So I'll let you show us how to share that passage now.
Okay, before I do that, David, talking about that, I can go in here and I go, actually, I want to find all the passages, say at grade 5 level. If I click on that, where it says reading age, I can then rearrange this now, and I can get it set up so that my list starts with the lower grade levels first. So so you can actually kind of organize your access to that as well. You can also, if you wanted to, I can go up to here and I can go to the filter, and now I can actually filter and just, find me reading passages around a particular topic area. I can actually up here look for passages between certain grade levels or reading ages as well. And here you can see where I've got it set up so I can actually only be looking at the content that's been generated by Fluency Tutor itself, or the content that I've generated as a teacher, and the content for both. So I'm just going to go back to there. Just go back. And now let's go and let's go through this. So as I click through, you can see there's heaps of them here, but I'm going to go and find this one. So here's just a passage, very short and sweet, not much to it. And I might want to share that passage with my students. Before I do that, I can look at that passage and go, yep, that's probably short, small, that's okay. It comes, because it's one of the passages that we've got built into Fluency Tutor, it comes built in with questions, and so it shows me what questions will be asked for the student, comprehension questions, and also it has the correct answers that I can see what they will be. Before I share that, I can go over here to the settings button, and I can decide if I'm going to share this with my students, what do I want them to get when they're getting this? Because I want them to get a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is the ability to have the passage read to them. I can choose which voice is going to be used. So I've chosen Karen as the voice, the Australian Karen voice. I've chosen the UK English Dictionary because I want the UK English spelling and grammar norms. I've also got access to a picture dictionary, and I can have that like this, but I could also, if I was perhaps working with students and English was not their first language, I could choose to have a picture dictionary that would come up and actually have it in another language, which is those ones listed there as well. And I've also can choose if I want to have a translation feature available where they can translate just individual words if they need that for it, if they weren't, English was not their first language. So I've chosen, I'm working with these students, and maybe Chinese is Mandarin is their first language. So once we're good to go, you can see here if I'm using the if I'm using our built-in passages, it does have comprehension questions. I can decide that I actually require the students to answer the questions, and you'll see what this means. I can turn off support, so I can actually have it what we call a cold read. They just have to read from scratch without any supports. But I'm going to show what those supports look like now, and I'm going to go confirm. So that's ready to go. And now, because I don't have Google Classroom, I'm just going to send it to my students. We're just using the Chrome browser, and they've all got a Google account themselves. I'm going to send it to their Drive. So I'm going to press on the icon that says Drive, and now it will generate a file for me to be sent to those students. And to do it this way, I've got to then send it to individual students. I've got to actually put in their email address. So I'm going to send it to, let me get Woody Haywood, there he is. So I'm going to send this, and I can put a note there, obviously, because he will get this as an email as well. Hey Woody, I know you can't wait for this, but here's a new reading passage for you. And I'll go send. And so then he actually gets sent that passage to his account.
Great. Can I just say in there, if I'm using in my school Google Groups, that I could share that directly with the students who are in a group?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, exactly, because you're sending it to that email. If they're using an email address, is that right? Or that Google group? Yeah.
So Google Groups is a great way for schools to be able to group students for different reasons. And so as a teacher, you could set up, if there were groups of kids that you wanted working in to be able to deliver different content to them, you could actually set them up in Google Groups, and rather than having to enter multiple email addresses, you can use one email for them. And also, obviously, if you were to share it through Google Classroom, then you would be disseminating it to your whole class.
Yeah. So you're doing the code, but back to Google Groups. So that's a good tip for people who don't have access to Google Classroom, but just want to use the Chrome browser and use G Suite tools, and they could use Google Groups in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on your setup within your school, you know, obviously if you're in a single instance with some of our departments of education or Catholic systems across the country, then that's managed differently. So if you are unsure, I'm happy, my email address is at the end. I'm happy for you to send me an email and I can send you a link to something to help you, but just ask the person that manages your G Suite instance in your school, and they'll be able to help you if you're not sure about using groups. But it's a great way of just having the one address for a whole group of people, basically.
Cool. So I've sent this this passage off to my students. Either this is an individual student or the Google group or my classroom, and the student that I've sent it to is actually this student here. I've got his account. And he can go in and he can get notification. A simple way that I'm going to do it here quickly is that on my students dashboard, he has, you can see it's a little bit different. It's much simpler because it's actually, they're not the teacher, they're the student. But a couple of things they can do is they can press on my drive. When he presses on my drive, he will see where I've shared any Fluency Tutor passage, it will come up. And then you can see today, there's Caves. That's the one I've just sent to Haywood, so he can click on that. He's just received this from me. I'll just give him that there. And when he clicks on that file, it will open, because he has Fluency Tutor installed. It's preparing it and it opens it up, and there you can see he's received the passage. How cool is that? It's got the picture that I had, and there's the text, and he's good to go. And when I talked about supports, I've set it up so that Haywood, that Woody does get support. So he has a couple of things. It tells him the Lexol level, that this is that. It tells him how many words that they're there. But if he's never seen this before, I don't want him to do a cold read before he records himself. I want him to have it read to him, have this passage read, him to kind of dive in and check out the vocab to make sure he understands what it's all about. So the first thing he can do is press the play button.
Caves are big. They are holes in rock.
And so I'll just stop that. So it's just having it read back. He can actually, I've got it set as the Karen voice, but Woody could change that accent if he didn't want that. If he comes across any words that he doesn't understand, so I don't know what that word is, there's a dictionary tool that's built in, so he can actually check that out. That dictionary tool will give him the definition of that word. Also, if it's the parts of speech, he can have any of those read back. If he needs more support than that, if that was too much text for him to read, he could also call up the picture dictionary tool, and that will give him an image for that word. And this is great because here it's telling him he's got to be careful, because this is one of those homophone, one of those confusable words. It could either be the rock, the thing called a rock, or it could be as in rock and roll. So you can check all that out. And if Woody needed that translated into perhaps his first language, and in this case I've chosen it to be simplified Chinese Mandarin, it will Fluency Tutor will also translate that to the individual word in that first language, and he can even have that read back. It's a little bit of a lag because I'm actually putting this through the webinar process, but he can have that read back as well. So that's cool. When Woody's ready to read this, he can just press the record button. And start recording. Caves are big. They are holes in rock. Caves are dark. And so Woody records this reading. And when he's finished, he can stop. It's just getting the recording sorted up. So what happens is he's now recorded himself reading. He can play that back and listen to himself. Caves are big. They are holes. It's also put a copy of that recording on into his Drive. So if I go back to Google Drive, this is Woody's Google Drive. In Google Drive, he actually has a folder here. That's my voice. He's got that recorded there, as well as he can download the recording as well. But having the recording, but he wants to send that now to his teacher, which is actually me. So he's going to press I'm finished, send this to my teacher. He presses on the send to my teacher, and it's now, that recording is now, you've made a recording and it's now been sent to the teacher. So let me flick back to me as my...
Can I just jump in for a second, Greg?
I was
just going to say that those support tools that are inbuilt for the kids when they're reading, I think are things that are incredibly valuable for obviously in terms of their literacy and their fluency, but I also think sometimes it's really important to consider how having those sorts of support built into the single page where our students are operating really makes a big difference to students who might have attention difficulties. Often when we are reading things online, if students want those supports, they might think they have to go somewhere else. And I think that's one of the great things that multiple text help products do, is actually integrate it into here so that they are not getting, opening a new tab and finding 1,000 other things to read in the interim as well.
Yeah. And actually, keep going.
Oh no, I was just going to say as well, and I think that's a great equalizer for having the ability to translate the word into their potentially their first language and things like that, without it being a big deal for the kid. It really encourages and I think empowers them to want to and to continue to succeed in reading.
Yep. And it's amazing the number of kids that will record themselves reading and actually do numerous recordings and play it back to themselves, because a lot of kids don't actually hear themselves reading, and it becomes a bit of a surprise to hear yourself read back to yourself. You actually get to listen to yourself read for the first time for lots of kids. We all hate our voice, don't we? Hate listening to the sound of our own voice, but
adults do, but I think kids do like it. I think you're right. As you're saying that, I'm thinking like if you ask an adult to do it, every single teacher I've ever done this with has that exact same face expression of like, genuine pain when I make them play it back to themselves. Whereas every kid's like, oh, listen to me. I like listening to this. And I think having that immediate ability to listen back, you'll often see that kids will re-record it because they're getting immediate feedback, from themselves and being able to do some self-assessment without, any other supports in place, just as an immediate, which is, we can't do without this sort of technology. So.
And the thing about that too is, so I've sent this to Woody, and he's okay, but it's the thing about engagement is that it becomes really engaging for him. He gets involved in this when he actually starts reading stuff that he wants to read, things that he is passionate about. And so what's really cool about Fluency Tutor while I'm sitting here in the student account is not only can Woody do this with information that I've sent to him as a teacher, but he can go in and find a web page, for instance, and go, this is what I really love this. I've just chosen this web page. It's got some text. It's a short story about elephants and friends. Woody can actually make this his own reading passage. So he's gone to a website, going, I want this. I'm going to record this and send this to my teacher. And when you've got Fluency Tutor installed, you also get the option to install an extension as well, and it's called Reading with Fluency Tutor. So Fluency Tutor is the app that's in Google. That's actually in Google Chrome as an app, but it also comes as this little add-on extension. And with that installed, if Woody wants to turn this website, or even if he wanted to turn a Google Doc, wherever he was, he can just press that little extension button, and it will take that website, look at the content on that website, and turn that into a reading passage. How cool is that? So he's actually gone and generated his own content that he can do exactly. And all those tools have been built in for him there. He can actually now check those out and you do the same thing. So he can generate that and send that to me as well, which I think is.
Yeah, I think that's a total game changer, Greg, because I think, like you're saying, what we want to provide students with is lots of opportunities, ample opportunities to be practicing their reading. And like you said, like if they're reading about things that they care about, it's going to make a big difference. And if they can actually, you know, read something online and record themselves and get that immediate feedback, that's great. And as a teacher, Greg, I can see how much my students are doing that as well, can't I?
You can, because you're going to get all this data recorded. Hey, Kimberly, the other thing about this too is that you know, in my class I've got it's not just kids sitting in rows of seats with me throwing reading material at them and getting them to read it. I can, because this is actually can be driven by the students. They can be anywhere in my room, but even outside my room doing this. So I can have a bunch of kids sitting in the playground doing some reading and finding passages, doing the stuff, and then sending it back to me, couldn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this as being something that's great to think about for teachers in terms of, you know, we often have had to teach reading often with running records, and, you know, manual entry is a really exclusive skill. But when you have this ability to find content that's relevant to the inquiry unit that you're studying, you know, it's just part of their actual classwork. So rather than them, you know, reading as a separate concept to the rest of their learning, it actually gets integrated into it, and the stuff that they're reading plays into their inquiry unit or into, you know, in senior years it's stuff that they're actually needing to read to upskill themselves in a completely different subject potentially, but building on their fluency skills at the same time.
Yeah. Actually, we'll come back to that, but let's just kind of go and see what happens now. After Hayward's, I'll just get out that and this find out, and we'll go back to recent activity. Now I'm back as a teacher. Hayward's done some stuff. He's read it, and I can see that he's sent through some reading, and I'm just going to have a look at this one. Here is as I sent him this one, reading caves. And I can see the little red dot tells me these are 2 new ones. So this is what we're just doing. The one on the top there, this one here, because we didn't actually do anything, there's no data there, but this one here, it's saying that Woody read this. It's a grade 5 level, and he read it for 12 seconds. It also is telling me here that when he was reading that, he looked up the dictionary to find out what the definition of rock was. He also tried to translate that word as well. And he looked at the pitch dictionary, so I can actually kind of see at a really glance that was some of the vocab that he was actually managing as well. But over here, I can now go in and press on that button, and here I get a little instant feedback where I can actually listen to Woody. Caves are big. They are whole. So I could actually listen to Woody and just give him a thumbs up straight away. I can give him immediate feedback. Well done, you know, good job. But if I want to, or great reading rather, but if I want to provide more data, get more data and provide more feedback, I press on score this passage. When I press on that, it gives me the passage that Woody had read. And this time I get the ability to check it out a bit more. So this was probably a bad example to use because it's only 12 seconds long, the reading, and I really wanted it to be at least a minute because I can't work out the words per minute rate unless he's reading for a minute. But anyway, here I can listen to Woody read. Caves are big. And let's just say, for instance, when he came to the word big, he had some kind of error occurred in his reading. I can press on the big, it automatically stops the recording for me at that spot, gives me a drop-down menu that looks like this, and then it tells me I can then decide whether that was a mispronunciation, a hesitation, insertion, an omission, a substitution, a transposition, a self-correction. And I can also later on, you'll see if he did read for a minute, when it gets to the minute mark, I can record that as the last word read at that minute mark. Let's just pretend it was a mispronunciation. They are holes in rock. Maybe that was an insertion. Oh, caves are dark. And I'll just kind of do a few of those. He records this reading, and when he's finished, And let's just say that was the last word he read there, and I marked that as that word there was the last word he read. But more important, I would mark it if it was at the 1 minute mark. And when I've done that, automatically it's generated some data for me over here. I can see how many mispronunciations he did. There were one of those, there were 2 insertions. And I can also see that he's currently reading at 43 words per minute, and he's reading at 40 words per minute, 40 words correct per minute. As well as that, I can go into score the reading. And now with score the reading, it actually, as well as calculating words correct per minute and the words per minute rate, I can also now give a score to his fluency. And we do that based on a matrix. So we do a matrix, and there's four levels to the matrix. And it's all about porosity. So the first level is expression. So what kind of expression was Woody using? And I'm thinking, oh, it's about, I think he was using some expression, and it gives you a brief description of each of these levels. So I'll choose number 2. Go next. The next stage in porosity is actually what kind of phrasing was he doing? Was he monotonic, or was he really well phrased? And we'll go back to number 2 for that. Then look at smoothness. You know, how was his reading? Was he generally a smooth reader, or did he have frequent pauses? So I'm just going to pretend he's all 2s on these, Kimberly. And he read at a moderately slow pace. I go next. It's giving me a fluency score out of 4, and then I can also give Woody some feedback, and I would give him some feedback about, you know, I love the way you read then, it was great. I look forward to the next time you give me some reading, whatever the feedback is I want to give him in terms of a text message. And then I'll go finish. That's now being scored as a passage. And I can now see that I've scored that passage for Woody. He comes out at that words correct per minute rate, and it's all good. If I go back to Woody and bring him up, go to his dashboard, go to recent activity, he will come up here and he will see that that you went to the teacher. He can open that up. You can see that this was 40. He got a score of 40 for that, for his words correct per minute. And if he opens up the passage now, he will get that information. He would also get, if I had left a little comment, he will have that there for him as well. But it'll also mark in the text frame, it will mark in different colors the different errors he made and tell him what they were. And so he gets some feedback about, not only generally for me about his reading, but he also gets specific feedback about where he found errors in his reading in a score. Okay, so that's kind of that process going backwards and forwards with my student.
Hey, Greg, we had a question come in whilst you were talking. I'm going to throw to Barb to share the question.
Okay.
Yep. Hi, Barb here. Just one
Hello,
question
Barb.
was.
Barb, can you introduce yourself? Can you introduce
I'm part of the TextHelp team, guys, and I'm originally an occupational therapist. Been working in technology, supporting students with literacy difficulties for a long time, longer than I want to share, basically. Hey, the question we have, this does take you back a little bit in your presentation, but it was just we asked, I'm trying to add a student or 2 as I don't have Google Classroom. How do I do this?
Okay, so you can either when you're sharing the passage, you can actually put students' individual email addresses in, and if you want to share that with a new student, you just share it to a new student via their email address. Or Kimberly, you could do it you can make up a group, can you not, and add a student to that group?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So, and if people are unsure about how to do a Google group and stuff, at the end we'll give you our contact details, and you just get in contact with us, and we can help you out about how to do that. Is that okay, Barb?
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
you had muted yourself. So
Yep.
Hey, I was going to say that while you're on this page and you're talking about being able to see the tools used by the student, I think even this snapshot of seeing like Hayward's overall, the activity recently and then the tools that is used, I think the actual visual there with the little icons can be quite impactful without even digging much deeper for a teacher, because you can see that this particular student is constantly using this particular tool, and that's potentially an area of opportunity for you to work with that student in that space. So it might be that vocab is a particular area around that they're always looking up the same type of word, or that they're constantly translating words, and help to potentially put some other supports in place for them for when they're not lucky enough to be reading through Fluency Tutor, for example.
Yeah, hey, talking about that, just as thinking about that, see here where I've got, he read this passage on the dashboard, and I can see this is Hayward, and he read the passage, and we scored him. And over here, it gives me a quick overview of the words that he looked up. Obviously he was searching for meaning, and he used. Now that could be, it could have been more than one word, but I can do something here really cool. So what I can do is I can go, oh, he looked up these words in the dictionary, he looked up this word in the translate tool, and this, it's the same word, unfortunately. I should have done a few different words, but here I can click on create a vocabulary list. What it will do automatically, just based on that data that I can see about him searching for meaning and understanding by choosing different words and trying to find out what they meant, Fluency Tutor will actually generate a vocabulary list for me that I can then share back with Hayward, and there it is. So it's actually generated a little list. It gives me, it makes a table, puts each word that he highlighted or looked for meaning. It gives him, it self-generates some definitions, which I can edit all that, and also gives me those symbols. So that's really cool, a really cool way that I can support him, but he could also use that same tool as well. So yeah, love it, I love it. Okay. So just while we're here, just looking at, if I go back onto my dashboard and go to my students dashboard, I can see Woody here, and I can see that he's been doing this stuff. So I want to find out a bit more about Hayward. That idea of not only he can look at all that data, but I want to see how he's been going. I can I keep a complete record of every time he's read and shared that passage with me. All that activity, the Lexile level he read at, the age, the reading age he read at. Well, now you have to ignore this because there's a lot of me just playing around with stuff because it's not a real student. But it also keeps this data up here. And what I can do is I just go back, go back over the last period of time, whatever, and I can see over a period of time this data represented in this kind of graph. And so what I have is in purple is his fluency score, and in orange is his words correct per minute rate, and it gives me this ongoing graph. I can download that data as a CSV file if I wanted to keep that. Maybe when it came to reporting back or having a discussion with other teachers about using data to look at how we're going to manage the learning program for him. But it keeps me all that data visually represented, and we're using the Google Drive environment to generate those analytics, which is really. Now we were talking about this before, weren't we, Kimberly? And you were asking about. That's cool, but what happens when I go on to another class next year and Woody goes to another teacher? What happens to all this data?
Correct. I was thinking about the longevity of this, because one of the things that I think is most powerful about this and being able to have this dashboard of the student progress is having a parent consult and saying, look, let's talk about your, Woody's reading progress throughout the year. And I can actually jump back at the top of the screen there, to a date last 4 months ago, and I could then bring up passages that Woody did 4 months ago, and there's obviously the data from any assessment that was done of that, but you can actually also listen, so you could play an actual example of student reading 4 months earlier versus today. And for many parents, I found that that sort of authentic example of student learning is so much more powerful than, you know, a lot of the data that we sometimes present them with, which doesn't necessarily have a heap of meaning to those who are not in the education field. But the other thing Greg and I were talking about was, that's right, like what happens when the kids transition between the years? Like, so if we decided we were going to start using Fluency Tutor tomorrow with our grade 3 students, grade 4 students, whatever it is, and then we obviously would love to see their progress from grade 4 to grade 5 to grade 6. And Greg was saying that the students actually can be transferred over to new teachers, and their data will be retained. So you could actually go back for several years and see their progress over, you know, a longer period of time, which is pretty powerful.
It is powerful, you know, and data's not about single points in time, you know, that doesn't tell me anything. What I want to see is this over time, you know, and there's going to be loops and dips and all that kind of stuff, but I want to see that line going up over periods of time, so that kind of data is important. Hey, I'm looking at the time, and so just to kind of, you saw how I made, Woody was able to generate his own content. If I'm a teacher, I can do exactly the same thing. It gives me a bit more scope, though. I can, you know, I can go to anywhere, a reading passage online that I want, or any text, or even my own documents I have. That might be in a Google Doc. I press the same button, the little icon in my extension that gives me the ability to turn reading web pages into reading passages, and here I get a lot more ability to actually go in and change how this looks. I can go into edit mode now, and I can do a whole bunch of stuff. So I can go in here and go, I don't want those words, and I can just get rid of that, for instance, and maybe I want to start this on a, get rid of that. I'm just going to do a quick bit of editing as I go, and then down the bottom, I don't want this bit and that, so because it's taken that text off the page. And now I go back to preview. That looks good. And now I actually can now, I quickly grab some text and I can now share that again. And that's when I generate my own reading passages. That could be from a web page, but also could be from a Google Doc. I could even, you know, text anywhere. I could actually get readers that I don't actually have digitized. I can digitize those readers, dump the text into Fluency Tutor, and then be having my students using Fluency Tutor to read, and we can be using all the tools we've just gone over to help us with those students. So yeah, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to this than we can spend in just 1 hour, Kimberly. We should have made it 2 hours, but anyway, can't do that.
Well, you and I need to learn to stop talking as much. One of the things I was going to say, Greg, that I think that is really powerful for students in terms of using this, that you've sort of touched on, I just want to reiterate it, particularly I think for you know, proficient readers and older readers, because we often think about reading support programs as being for those junior year kids who are learning to read, emerging readers, but the ability to have text read to you. And there's an example in one of the passages in Fluency Tutor is, I think it's a Martin Luther King speech that's in there, and you know, actually having the kids in a senior classroom, for example, listen to that speech being read to them, and then they're listening for the fluency, and they're listening to the, you know, pronunciation and the diction and the pacing and stuff like that, as a great modelling tool for that. And the ability to do that if you're a languages teacher, so not necessarily solely in English as well, and allowing kids to have access to creating as many passages as they like, plus you being able to share lots and lots of passages, is really an opportunity to have that true immersion into a language, whether that's English or one of the other languages. And I believe there's 6 languages or 7 languages, which we won't necessarily go into now in here as well, which I think is very cool.
Hey, that thing about senior students, Kimberly, I just made me think, I know we need to shut up, but you could actually have a student who may be wanting to do a class presentation. They could actually write out their presentation, create a Fluency Tutor passage, record themselves, and then send that recording to their teacher to get some feedback on their actual, the porosity on their actually reading of the passage, their fluency of how they read it when they come to present it in class. So that would be cool as well.
And we were talking about before that because all of these audio files that are created are saved within Drive, it actually means that a student could not only share it with their teacher, but they could actually share the individual audio file. It wouldn't have all the associated other tools with it, but the audio file with peers, so in their classroom or in other classrooms, or even their parents to be able to listen to. And so, you know, like those senior kids or the junior kids, and they're practicing their oral presentation that they have for an upcoming assessment task, and they can share it with, record themselves, share it with their teacher, you know, listen back to themselves, but also share it with some of their classmates and get some feedback that way. And you know, I've always found as a teacher that as soon as you get students sharing amongst themselves and collaborating within the classroom, the quality and the standard of their work drastically improves, because they'll give you anything as a teacher often, but they really, really care about what they make sure that their peers hear, and so that takes it sometimes to a whole new level with the students as well.
So that that being said, with all the stuff we've just done, if I had to say to you, Kimberly, what if you key to, you know, you're starting off the school, this is a new school year, 2019, you've got Fluency Tutor. Are there any quick ideas, or how would you start to use this in your school if you could get to, I'm going to show everyone how to get it in a minute if you had this available.
Okay, so because of time, I'll give you I'll try to do 30-second answer, although I just spent 30 seconds telling you I was going to talk for 30 seconds. I love the idea of, Greg showed in the settings before how you could actually switch off all of the tools, and so the kids can do a cold reading. I think using some pre-assessment is a really great place to start. So we have some baseline data of where the kids are reading, so without any of the supports, just getting a good sample of students reading where they currently are. And then the other thing that I think is really important to think about is that one of the things I like about Fluency Tutor is that it's really creative in that it doesn't have to be that one-size-fits-all model. So you can customize it all for the individual student, and they can customize their own experience with it as well. But you can also have it working in different ways in your room. And so Greg and I were talking about those like learning stations being set up, and we have some group of students over here who are, you know, reading passages and recording it and sending them back to the teachers. And then there's a group of students over here who are just listening to the reading, and they're really working on their vocab, and they're immersing themselves in the reading. And then there's a group over here who are listening to one another read, and so the kids can actually be you know, engaged in this in a way that we can't do with, you know, traditional reading and the teaching of traditional reading practice. I think with running records, it enables the teacher effectively to have an insight into multiple places and multiple students in the classroom at the same time.
And I know we throw this word around a lot, but it is transformational, isn't it? What we, you know, it can really change the way we do things, and really this idea of personalization, learner agency, really comes to forefront. So with all that in mind, let's get started. Well, how can you get it? You actually don't currently have Fluency Tutor. How can you get it? You just go into Chrome, you go to the Chrome Web Store, you do a search for Fluency Tutor, and you just, away you go. Now it's in fact most of it's free. You know, the bits around creating your own content and the actual data that you can generate, and all that way it's generated into, and you can make Google Sheets with and stuff. That's part of the premium package of it, but the beginning bits of it are all free. So you should just go and grab that now. And the way you do that, go to the Chrome store, you get it installed. You then make sure that if you're the teacher, you choose Teacher, and it gives you a quick video on how to get started. If you get your students, make sure you get it installed for them as students. You then, once you've got it installed, you've got your dashboard, you share your first passage, and bam, you're away you go. So, and you also need to get this share with Fluency Tutor, the little extension to create your own resources as well. And while you're there, thinking of free for teachers stuff, don't forget that Read and Write, and we didn't get a chance to show how Read and Write works with Fluency Tutor, but it is also free for teachers as well. And if you just go to that address on that screen, and you'll get these slides, so this will all be given to you in our follow-up email, you can get access to that as well. So before I finish, I just want to kind of tell you that this is a series of webinars we're doing for back to school, as well as a whole bunch of other webinars we'll be providing over the next 12 months from the Asia Pac Text Help team here based in Brisbane. You can get in contact with us in lots of different ways. One really quick way you can do that is by joining our Facebook group. You just need to go to Facebook and do a search for Asia Pac, and there we're in the groups, and we're there. And that's an open group. You can just join that. It's moderated, of course, and we'd love to hear from you. And it's full of great content. We're sharing information up there all the time, not only about our products, but generally about educational technology and education in general. The other thing you can do, let's go back, is actually contact us directly at asiapac@textop.com. And there's not only myself and Fiona Thomas, who's also with me as the educational technology specialist in the team. We've got Barb, who we met earlier on. And we've got all our team there, and including technical support. So it's all live on the spot in Oz, looking after Australia and New Zealand. So we're here to help. And I just promised you before, you're not going to get an email from us until the middle of next week with resources. But if you want to have a quick sneak peek about some of the great resources we're going to share, if you go to that address on your screen and maybe quickly take a screenshot of that, www.gregoryo'connor.com/resources/login, and you'll ask you for a password. The password is TextHelp, and you'll get a bunch of stuff. So just quickly take that down, take a screenshot of that, write that down. And also we are so pleased that we had you with us, Kimberly, to share all the amazing stuff that you talked about and the things that we do, and we work closely together. Asia Pac TextHelp works really closely with the EdTech team, particularly around their professional learning opportunities they provide. Could you tell us a bit more about that before we go to the next slide?
Sure. So yeah, as Greg said, we partner with TextHelp and a whole lot of other great EdTech companies all around the world, and EdTech team puts on conferences each year. We have a theme for this year's conferences: what will you create? You can check out the info at events.edtechteam.com/ANZ summits for Australia and New Zealand. But we also provide a whole lot of customized professional learning experiences for teachers, and we come and help you maximize your investments in technology and look at ways, like we talked about today, that you can actually start to move the use of technology further up that SEMAR model to be doing things that were previously inconceivable without technology. And my email address is there if you want to ask any questions, and I'm always happy as well to connect and just support people in their EdTech journey.
And TextHelp is a proud sponsor of EdTech team, and just a bit of a heads up, keep an eye out, because hopefully sometime this year Kimberly and I will be doing some stuff together, some PD in various places. So hopefully that's all kind of come together.